G'day, I'm David Hart. Welcome to my studio here in Queensland, Australia on the Sunshine Coast. If you're watching this now, then you've either gone into one of my galleries and bought the DVD, or you purchased from the website, or you've been lucky enough to download to your iPad or your iPhone, which is really cool. In any case, welcome to my first installment or my first series of tips and tricks. If you're living in Australia, you definitely would have heard of me, or at least my father, Pro Hart. I come from a very well-known, very famous, iconic Australian art family, and that's where I learned all my tips and tricks, standing at my dad's easel, watching him over the years, and hopefully that's something I can pass on to you as a viewer. If you do want to know more, you can always go to my website, which is www.davidhart.com.au, and take a look at my biography for some more information. Okay, what I'd like to start with is basically just answering a few questions that I most commonly get asked, and that is, what should I paint? Well, in my opinion, I think you should paint whatever you're passionate about, but first thing you've got to think about is why you're painting. Are you painting because you want to sell your work commercially, or if you're just painting for fun? And that's going to have some determination on the type of subject matter that you want to do. For me, because my work's sold commercially, I like to look at my surroundings. So here on the Sunshine Coast, that's the beaches and the hinterland, and also some of my Australian heritage as well. So I find that some of those subject matters really lend themselves both passionately for me, but also commercially. People like to purchase work like that. So today we're going to start off with watercolours. Alright, before we start off with watercolours, I just wanted to touch base on one important point, and that is one of the questions I get asked a lot is people say, can you teach me to paint, or can you teach me art? And the simple answer to that is no, you can't teach art. And the reason why you can't is because art is something that comes from inside you, and everybody sees things differently. The thing that you can teach is technique, and so that technique will help you to get your ideas from your head down onto paper, and quite often that's really the big thing people struggle with, is they say, I've got ideas but I don't know how to get them onto paper. Alright, so today what we're going to do is we're going to start off with some watercolours, and watercolour is really where I learnt to paint. People say, oh, watercolour is the most difficult thing you can learn. I don't think so. I think it's all much of a muchness, but what I did discover is the things that I learnt in watercolour, I was able to take right through all the different styles that I paint. And I paint with a myriad of different things. I paint, with oils and acrylics and enamels and gouache and mixed media, all sorts of things. And all these techniques have all grown from me learning watercolour. So I figure that's a great place to start. Okay, the type of watercolour that we're going to be using today is actually called gouache, and I've got some just here. I don't know if you can see that. You don't really need anything fancy. In fact, when I, as a kid growing up, we used to go on holidays to the Gold Coast, and my dad would just take, if he didn't take paints with him, he'd go to the newsagent, just buy some kids' watercolour paints. It's enough to get you going. It doesn't have to be flash, but today we're using Winsor & Newton. They're a good quality company, and it's the brand of paints that I use in my own studio here when I'm painting stuff for myself. So you can use anything there, but Winsor & Newton, it's called gouache, which is a type of watercolour. It's kind of a cross between watercolour and acrylic paint, but it can be put on a little bit thicker, but generally it's a washing type paint. So that's what we're going to get started with. So I'll go through my palette colours with you as we go, but to start with, what we need to do is we need to make a bit of room on my bench here. First thing we're going to need is some paper. And the type of paper that I'm using is called Arches watercolour paper. This is about 280 to 300 GSM. It's quite sort of stiff, and it's got I like to call it tooth. I don't know if that's the correct name for it, but it's got a bit of tooth to it, like a bit of roughness on the surface. And the reason why I like that is because it really tends to catch the bristles on the brushes and gives you a nice effect, which I'll show you later. And so that's what we need to start with. So I'm going to cut out a size, and then we're going to stick it down to a piece of foam core, which I have here. And that's just a bit of foam board. You can put it on anything really. And we'll tape that down and get ready to get started. Alright, well that was great. I hope you enjoyed that. I've got the completed item here, and so we really hope that you've learned a lot from that. No, I'm kidding. Okay, what we have here is a watercolour that I've painted previously on a piece of 300 GSM watercolour paper. So just to give you an idea at you know, the type of things you can produce with gouache, which is quite a nice effect, you know. And I've created a very Australian outback type scene here, family having a picnic in the bush. So we might do something along those lines today, and you know, I'll show you some techniques that I use to paint this painting, and we'll take it step by step and get you painting. Okay, well the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the size that I need. This is a pretty standard sort of size for me. I've got some frames ready to fit this size, so I'll cut this out and we'll start getting it ready to stretch. Alright, here we go. I've cut my bit of paper out ready to paint on. So I'm just examining a little bit just to make sure I've got, you know, a good surface. It's not clean or there's any stains or marks or anything on it, so it's ready to stick down and get started. So what I'm doing, I'm just using a bit of masking tape to hold the painting down. It's what we call stretching it. So we're just going to roughly stick this down, and then we'll start to wet the paper. Alright, well that's step one. We've got our water paper all nicely taped down onto our piece of foam core, and the next step is we're going to wet the paper down to help stretch the paper, and we're also going to put a sky in. Now this is one of the first little tips that I'll give you, and that's how to put a sky into a watercolour, and we'll also put a bit of the ground in as well. So it's probably the most important part of the painting, because it's the start of the painting, and it'll create a bit of the feel of the painting as well, the temperature of the sky and the ground. So the first thing we're going to do is wet the paper down, and then we'll mix up some sky colour. Okay, well we're ready to start. So what we're going to do, first thing we're going to do is we're going to wet down the paper. And what I've got for this, I've got, you know, I may not use them all, but I always paste up a few extra brushes in case you want to keep working it and there's a bit of paint on something, you don't have time to clean it off. So I've got 4 brushes here. I'll take one of the big ones, get a good amount of water down on the paper. What we're going to do is we're going to put the sky and the ground down while the paper's wet, because the whole absorption process is part of the the look and feel that you'll get, and you'll see what I mean as we start to put a little bit of this in. So I kind of, it can be a little bit strong, so I kind of just do a little bit out in the corners like this. Bring the edges down a bit. Don't worry if you leave a few spaces and things around, and you'll see why in a minute, because we'll just kind of blend it out. So we'll just do a bit of simple sky. Sometimes I'll put little bits of purple or a little bit of pink in there as well. That can quite often look quite good. I'll just put this in my bucket of water down here. And then what I'll do is I get a dry brush and just begin to sort of, I call it scrumbling. So I kind of scrumble out the sky and just kind of blend it into the wetness of the paper. So just staying on some of the lighter bits, leaving some of the darker bits alone. Now the reason why my shirt looks the way it does is because I do things like this, because I can't be bothered looking for paper to wipe things on. Alright, well our painting's looking really good. We've got our sky in and our ground, and it's a great base to start our painting. But if you want to see me complete the painting from start to finish, you're going to need to purchase the DVD, David Hart Tips and Tricks. It's only $19.95, and to buy it, all you have to do is visit www.davidhart.com.au and you can pick it up online on my web store. If you purchase any products up to the value of $30, I'll give you the DVD. And while you're there, by purchasing anything from our web store, you get to go into a competition which we draw each month, where you can win a limited edition print of the painting that I'm going to complete on the DVD Tips and Tricks.